So this is the front page of Tuesday's London Daily Mirror, and it says that the interview on the Oprah Winfrey, broadcast on Sunday, has created the worst royal crisis in 85 years. Now, this is absolutely, totally opposite to what they had been saying on, on the days before the airing, including the boastful assertion that Brenda is the name that we have given to Queen Elizabeth II. And it is coincidental that Brenda is the name that has been given by the Private Eye magazine, but we call her Brenda. And regardless of what the source of that name previously had been, because that actually brings her to life, to ordinary life, and shows her in flesh and blood, or blood and flesh and whatever. And this crisis that the Daily Mirror is saying is the worst crisis facing the family fronted by the so-called monarch, Brenda, aka also known as Queen Elizabeth II, is the worst crisis that they have had. And the Daily Mail is stupid, typical, because they were the ones who said more boldly than even the Rupert Murdoch scum that Brenda wasn't going to even watch it. I mean, it's like a dustbin. The way they painted, the Fleet Street painted the interview, then imminent, was like they were treating this as a pack of dust or dirt or whatever. Whereas now, according to the presentation on the Daily Mirror, that has affected the Brenda family in 85 years. And on pages 4 and 5 of the Mail, just to give a kind of detailed taste of what the extent of the devastation is and the extent of the lying by the Daily Mail has been, they're now admitting, remember lying before, because they were lying, boasting that the interview, imminent at that time, the last, let's say 48 hours, was rubbish, and it wasn't going to be even watched by Brenda, the main kind of fronter of the royal business. And here the Daily Mail lyingly and stupidly and dishonestly and shamelessly admits bombshell after fresh bombshell, devastating disclosures that left the royals reeling. So why did they boast that Brenda wasn't going to even watch it? And if she didn't watch it, who watched it for her? And who in her so-called family, royal family, kind of cobbled together this emergency urgent calls or urgent talks, because that is what the reports are now saying in the Fleet Street lying papers. That there are urgent calls, urgent talks being held to save the monarchy. It is that bad. And even though the Daily Mirror is saying that the crisis hitting the Brenda family is the worst in 85 years, it's really not worst in 85 years. It is probably worst one that in publicity terms, in public relations terms, in reputational terms, the worst that has ever hit this particular kind of family. Remember, we believe the royal family is bogus. All royal families are bogus, made up. But some royal families when they operate and they're allowed to run, they behave almost with a semblance of decorum and dignity and integrity. Others collapse. But this one has been the subject of collapsing and disintegration since, in the internally, that is the domestic English kind of context, since the disclosures about Brian, that is Brenda's elder son Charles, kind of being unfaithful to Diana, and that Diana was being kind of forced or pressured to live in a kind of marriage that had too many people. That is, it was overcrowded by Camilla now, and all the other things that followed, the disclosures, have not helped the image of the royal family. But none of the others were as directly focusing on the racism of this corrupt family, of this racist family. Not even the many assertions of racism made against Brenda's family and against Philip by Dodi Fayad's father, Muhammad Al Fayad. Remember that Al Fayad was the kind of last person kind of reported as the kind of boyfriend of Diana at the time that the both of them were murdered in that kind of staged accident. And that claim or series of claims made by Al Fayad, centrally that claim was that they were murdered because of Al Fayad being a Muslim and the royal family being racist. And this has been one of the main things that has remained unresolved. Unresolved in the sense that the Fleet Street slaves have never accepted Al Fayad's allegations. And yet there has been no apology, no show of remorse by any of the royal family about the actual murders. And they have done everything to create a kind of barrier of access to the truth. And they have done that in order to maintain the reputation for business purposes. It's a business organization, the royal family. Now, this is the first direct accusation from a member of the royal family by marriage that the racism is absolutely intolerable and brazen. Intolerable and brazen. And the other thing is that the hate campaign that is still ongoing, and it will get worse, as I said before, against Meghan and against Harry because he married this black woman. This hate campaign will only help to collapse what remains of the royal family's reputation. Because this is an age of publicity and propaganda and so on. And the more the people know about Brenda and her corrupt, racist family, the less acceptable the family would be. Bigger organizations, bigger businesses have collapsed under reputational loss. Well, one of the most recent business to collapse, of course, is not kind of similar in terms of numbers, but the reputation has been central to the destruction of Harvey Weinstein and his big business in Hollywood. I mean, this is something undisputable. So this is what is going to happen to Brenda's family. And what the Fleet Street criminals are doing today and have been doing for days is to help bring about the disintegration of Brenda's family by fueling anti-Meghan propaganda in advance of the airing. And now they're doing it after the airing of the Oprah Winfrey interview. Historically, so let's go back to the times of the Greeks. 2,000 years ago or so on. The collapse of the big kind of dynasties and whatever happened because of reputational disintegration and notoriety, and the lack of confidence happened throughout the history. I don't know exactly how long human life has been on this planet, but based on the accounts of all these dynasties and big eras and big empires and whatever, reputation has played the central part in the sustaining of the particular dynasty or the collapse of it. It has happened everywhere. Because what the heads of the kind of clans or businesses or enterprises fail to understand is that although compared to them, because of wealth and etc., ordinary people who don't have the wealth like them and don't have access to the armed forces and military power, etc., the actual belief on the part of individual people, otherwise powerless, the actual belief, if it is widespread enough in one direction, and it is based on no confidence and no respect in the or for the royal family or the dynasty, then that's it. That is the end of the dynasty, and no amount of repairing further racism will save Brenda's monarchy. Now, as a student of constitutional law, I have made exclusive studies of the various aspects and facets of the so-called unwritten constitution of Britain. And I don't think at all that democracy will lose, or the cause of democracy will lose if the royal family collapses. And that is something that is not encouraged by Fleet Street. And it's not something that is encouraged by the so-called academic kind of students and observers. But this society is unfit for the purpose. It is racist and kind of consolidating and entrenching, making racism firm as an example to be followed by the many. And the gullibles in the population, that is the 52%, are misled by example of this racist monarch and this racist monarchy. So they may never have planned any of this, Meghan and Harry, but they have found themselves at the absolute center of a disintegration of something very bad. Whatever their backgrounds individually, this is something that they can actually, if they behave wisely, they can make use of this moment and they can contribute, however numerically insignificantly, but contribute to the debate for democracy and for accountability, for an end to racism. It may not succeed ending racism, but the argument for ending racism is worth having. And the Daily Mail is so stupid, it says that he's blown up his own family. Let's deal with this one. How has he blown up his own family? They took away all his privileges, which he was entitled to the member of the family. And now he's trying to defend himself. And they said that he has blown up his own family. I mean, what they did was what blew up that family. Okay? So that's the short answer. And they're saying, just look at the strain on their faces on these pictures. And Boris Johnson, who is described as a congenital liar by the French ambassador to the UK over the last few years. I mean, he's not a source of any moral kind of certificate. And yet the stupidity of the Daily Mail is evident in the fact that it's citing an alleged ally of Boris Johnson, who says that Boris Johnson holds the Queen in the highest admiration. I mean, that is killing by praise. He doesn't come out, and his alleged ally, who is in the headline at least unknown, is saying that he holds the Queen or the Brenda in the highest admiration. Now, that's not unexpected. That is how he should be, because he's the incumbent occupant in the post of Prime Minister. So he has to show that he has nothing but admiration for Brenda. Otherwise, he would be out of office himself, because the gullibles would go for him. And then they're saying that there are questions as to how many of the claims by Meghan and Harry are truthful. Well, this kind of exchange will continue. But let's say essentially that it was the racism that did it. And as we said, the racist assault on Meghan and Harry is being led by Kate Middleton. And here is a reluctant confession by the Daily Mail that Kate made Meghan cry. That is absolutely evident even before the broadcast of the interview, because all the things that I have studied suggest that Kate Middleton is the one that is ruling the kind of war, and her mother is behind her, and Brenda is being used as a susceptible, gullible racist to comply with Kate's agenda. And have you noticed that there is no mention so far until the next sentence of Harry's brother William? And the reason why William is not being mentioned is because he's irrelevant to what is going on in the royal family, apart from the fact that he's, of course, hierarchically, he's lined up to succeed whoever is the next kind of going to be incumbent after Brenda. And if Brian steps in and stays for a token amount of time, so far, it's Wills that will kind of follow him. The Wills should follow him, but Wills will not be his own person. He will not be doing anything independent, which is what is happening now. He's not doing anything independent, and he's really not offering anything. And there is a comment which is very rare by Lindsay Nicholson on Meghan, and she says, which is unlike everything else that the Daily Mail has been saying against Meghan and Harry, that the royals let impressive women slip through their fingers. She's saying that Meghan is an impressive woman, and everything suggests that she is, and the fact that she introduced this family to the world, the real world, and she would have done absolutely amazing things to give credibility to this sick racist group. And they haven't understood, they haven't got a clue about the value of her role. Now, as I said in part A, the Daily Mail is boasting the 25 pages of unrivaled reports. We are not going to read the 25 pages. And this is the absolute correct headline. A confession by Richard K. that the only winners from this are those who hate the monarchy. Well, that is absolutely correct, but that's not the whole heading. As I said before reading that one, the democracy would benefit from the collapse and the end of this racist monarchy. The democracy that has been stifled and sabotaged and undermined and denied for a very long time. And that it cannot come soon enough. But the blame for the timing of the collapse, if you like, has to be put at the doors of Fleet Street and the racists that they actually are still supporting and promoting. Now that's the Guardian on the front page, and just to make sure that it's visible, as the Guardian says, the palace in crisis following the devastating racism claim. Now, racism in the BBC and racism in the palace, racism in parliament, racism in government, racism in local councils, these are not minor issues. Racism at every level destroys, disrupts, damages, harms, and denies human rights, every level, every day, every time, every contact. So what has happened with this particular Fleet Street kind of outrage is something unprecedented, because they never ever had to connect the two, the Brenda family and racism. But outside, where the many exist or have to exist, racism has been violating the life and life process every single day. When I first came to London, I traveled in by the British BOAC, British Overseas Airways Corporation, and I landed at Heathrow. And because of the transport arrangements, I had a currency note of 5 taka or 5 rupees, whatever it is, it was called. And the taxi that I had to kind of hire in order to get to my destination inside London, because Heathrow is not inside London, although it is in the London area, but it's not inside London. And the taxi cab at that time charged much smaller amount than what they charge now. The first thing I felt as I got into the taxi rank or outside of the Heathrow airport, I felt unbelievable, new kind of cold. I never had felt such cold before. And it is a memory that I have, which is that was the chill. That was the chill that greeted me. And I thought, where have I come? Because I felt that chill would dominate the whole year, etc., etc. But although the chill has gone physically in terms of the kind of overwhelming sensation that covered me with a chill. The overall human kind of experience of encounters and contacts with people every day has been even chillier than that climate of chill, if you like. So the culture of chill is absolutely everything to do with the racism that Meghan Markle is talking about. And of course, Harry is sympathetic to her talking about it. So, for example, on the day after, I think, the day after the Brexit referendum result was published, I was walking in East London, and I was walking at least 100 yards away from the main road, and I couldn't see the actual face, but I could see the little images of two male white persons on a van. And one of them shrieked about it, shouted so loudly, as racists do from the moving vehicles. You cannot understand the actual words they say, and they don't intend you to understand anything that they say. The purpose of the shout was racist, to give me like a reminder that this was a Brexit Britain. And they actually interpreted immediately Brexit as a license to be more racist. It doesn't need any research. That is what happened. And that is why it is the only single most important issue, racism, that decided the outcome of the Brexit. And Brexit was operated, the campaign was operated, it was set up, it was run for racist outcome. Every single incident, institution, every single shop, every single road in Britain, in London, is racist. That is to say, it's the experience people have on every street, every road, is an experience that is caused by racism. And what the Guardian today is saying is, of course, typical Guardian. But what it should say, and what it has never said, and I'll come to similar comparable incidents and events when the Guardian should have said something that it is not saying, and it should be saying now. The Guardian is saying the crisis, but it's not saying that racism is the crisis. It is talking about the impact or impacted family. It's not saying about the society. Make a note of what I'm saying in distinguishing these two. It may appear that the Guardian is saying that there is a crisis because of the interview. But the Guardian is saying that the crisis is for the future of the monarchy, not for the urgent need to end racism that the monarchy has been practicing. So, the other thing that I was saying, that the Guardian has done the same thing before. Say, for example, 1981. In 1981, the first so-called riots took place in Bristol, in the city of Bristol, during the early part of the year 1981, against racism. And then it took up to July, until July of that year, before similar kind of riots broke out in parts of London and other cities. Say, for example, in the main, most notably, Brixton in South London, South Hall in West London, where the main mixture of the population is based on the Indian and Sikh people and white people. In Brixton, it is mainly the population mixture is, of course, white people and people from the Caribbean, what is now called the Windrush generation. Many of the kind of descendants of the Windrush generation, the youngsters that did the riot in Tottenham and other parts, and in Birmingham, in Sheffield, and in Toxteth in Liverpool. And after the Brixton explosion, where the connection was Jamaican and other Caribbean black people, mainly Jamaican, the Guardian sent the elder brother of Trevor Terrible Phillips. Trevor Terrible Phillips, so the elder brother, is an acquaintance of mine. Don't want to call him a friend. I have known him long enough, but I don't want to call him a friend in case he doesn't understand any such kind of references. But I have known him significant amount of time. So the Guardian sent Mike Phillips, whom I don't call Phillips because I know him and I don't think he's a Philip, but his brother is. So the Guardian sent Mike Phillips to Brixton. And the report that they subsequently published was completely dishonest and racist and incomplete and lacked all the fervor, all the life that those who rioted had expressed in their behavior. Well, I have witnessed other riots after that, but this one is significant in terms of the policies of the racist Guardian, or the racist policies of denial by the Guardian. And the report was completely diluted. It diluted the actual spirit and the atmosphere and the truth of the outrage that the rioters felt against the racist police. Because the police, as they experienced, were the main operators of racism. Now, I have not known any individual police person in any way, except one policewoman who I had kind of met at a polling station, and I thought that she would be doing something significant against the crimes on the Council estates in Tower Hamlets. And for a long time, she has disappeared. I don't know where she is and what she is doing, whether she's still in the police force or not, I don't know. So that's the only one which is exceptional in terms of kind of talking to a police person personally over a period of at least a month, few months. Apart from that, I don't know any police person personally. And the perception about police being racist is widespread among African people, Asian people. And that perception is not a fantasy perception. And this is something that is getting worse. The behavior. So the Guardian didn't talk about that. The Guardian didn't follow up on that. So there was this commission, Scarman inquiry. And the Scarman inquiry has been overly praised as being a milestone inquiry into race and racism in this country. But if you read the actual contents of the Scarman inquiry, you will find that it is racist. Although it is painted as being anti-racist, it is racist. Because the language, the phrases, the phraseology, etc. are all based on the assumption that empire was superior, British was superior, and there was a unique thing called British values. Now, any objective study of racism will show that anyone who says that there is a special thing called British values is perpetuating and perpetrating racism. The truth is that there are universal values, and the universal values are very much different from British values. And every time there is a kind of inquiry or investigation, such as the Scarman inquiry, or more than 10 years later, the Macpherson inquiry into the Metropolitan Police following the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence. All these inquiries, as I have said before in the context of the Sheffield Football Club massacre inquiry, these inquiries are intended to kind of calm the heat down, if you like, and halt the extra furore and agitation, and to calm things down. These inquiries are never, ever intended as spontaneous investigation into wrongness of parts of the state or wrongness of an institution or whatever. These inquiries are intended as a vehicle to calm things down. It's a kind of admission of failure by the government and the state, but it's not an admission of liability or responsibility. And nothing has been done after any of these inquiries, either Scarman inquiry or Macpherson inquiry, to actually reverse the racist norms or the racist excuses and patterns that caused the initial riot or whatever. And the fact that they haven't changed anything is evident in the fact that Black people experience discrimination, harassment, etc., even now. That is decades after the Scarman inquiry and decades after the Macpherson inquiry. And as in the so-called mainstream, there is no opposition. That is to say, there is no opposition kind of advocating alternative to the existing status quo of rotten dysfunction. And in the case of the Bangladeshi people, for example, and the Caribbean people or people of other backgrounds from Africa and Asia through Caribbean, continuing to experience racism, there is no alternative. That is to say, there is no platform. There is no institution, there is no organization, there is no forum that has consistent membership from all these communities, let alone has any regular accessibility given to it by the mainstream media or anyone. The type of things that do exist are the opposite of what should exist. For example, the Operation Black Vote. Now, the Operation Black Vote is not a democratic assertion of the universal human rights of the people that are described as black. It is an operation for a stooge role. That is to say, it serves as an agency of the mainly, not exclusively, the mainly Labour Party so-called left or Labour Party in terms of gathering election time, gathering votes for a particular party or thing. And this is something that has been useful to a limited extent, but this has been useful for only as a stooging service. Operation Black Vote, which was founded by Ken Livingstone with the help of Lee Jasper, it is not a democratically demanding enterprise or platform at all, and it is not itself democratic. It's a kind of cabal. It's a secret kind of cabal that is publicly operated and supported, but it is not really democratically run, and it has not allowed or invited access to people who are democratically campaigning or would democratically campaign for the rights of the black people, African and Asian origins together. And it's not rigorously against racism either. So that is one. The other one is the one that has been created by Unite, the trade union. And it's a, more or less, it's a racist, anti-racist kind of license thing. It has got some Asian and African names in it. But these are doing the job of the racists, making excuses and creating pretexts for the racists to, racist, anti-racist to claim that they're doing some anti-racist work. So these are not having any impact to stop the likes of the Buckingham Palace racists at all. In fact, if the Brenda, the Queen, sends the message for the Operation Black Boat today to rush to Buckingham Palace and pay their homage at her feet, they will do that without any question. So on the one hand, there is rampant racism rising in Britain, and on the other, there is absolutely no kind of resistance to racism at any level, except in piecemeal way, separated, kind of uncoordinated way. So we got, so what I'm talking about essentially is that extends to local councils. And the woman, Shogba Mimu, that has been in the news about the fact that she told Piers Morgan off because of his calling her remark against the racist monarchy. Piers Morgan called this Shogba Mimu woman disgusting because she made a critical comment about Buckingham Palace being racist to Meghan Markle. And so what happens is that there is nothing in the media like the GMB, which is the Good Morning Britain slot on ITV television. There is no real discussion against racism, let alone extended discussion, analysis on a daily basis on the need for racism to be eliminated and opposed and directly identified, and the racists being held to account. There is nothing like that. There should be, but there is nothing like that. So I could list hundreds of kind of public faces, and in this context, including the likes of George Galloway. Now, as I've said before, Galloway has made a niche. It's a profitable niche that has helped him financially and otherwise to kind of paint himself as a friend of the Palestinians. As a white-skinned man, if he appears anywhere in the UK or in the brainwashed Middle East and says extraordinarily emotionally crafted words and phrases about the plight of the Palestinians, then his propaganda image gets very solid following. And the reason is not because the people who follow or behave or kind of react in that way are kind of fooled by the pretension that the white skin is better, and white skin is definitely proof of intelligence compared to the African and Asian people. Not that at all. It is the acceptance by the people in the Middle East that a white man making those points which need to be made for the Palestinians are getting across to other white people who would not receive similar comments or words from a person who is African or Asian or a Palestinian. But these people are, the likes of George Galloway, are in a career. They're not in a campaign, lifelong campaign, movement against racism, not whatsoever. So today's Times, which again is running a topical, kind of exceptional headline, that is Palace in turmoil over Meghan's racism claim. This is something that is absolutely extraordinarily rare, because Buckingham Palace is not accused often. And to be accused by a member of the family by marriage that the Buckingham Palace, the monarchy, is racist, has been racist, is, in terms of incident, in terms of the number of occurrence, very rare indeed. And it is something for that reason that will have repercussions that will be active and be felt actively for a very long time, long after Brenda is gone. So what this Sun is saying, in typical denial mode today, is, so who is the royal racist? And without any doubt, they will find that there is no royal racist at all. They will conclude, the Sun, that it's all Meghan's imagination. But the Sun will fail on this one, because this is not a one-off headline. Meghan has now been given about 90% favorable coverage across the Western white kind of world, Australia, New Zealand, Southern Africa, North America, Canada, United States. She has got the overwhelming majority of the coverage in her favor after the racism of the royal family. And they are denied that the Sun is pages and pages of denial. Absolutely the same as the Daily Mail. And it has got 14 pages inside against Meghan Markle and Harry. And here is an admission by the Times, which said that the Fleet Street was lying when it said that Brenda wasn't going to watch this interview, because Brenda is really hit big time with this one. And being a racist, she needs more time to consider royal family's response to Oprah interview. Not only is she going to watch it, she is going to be very carefully in responding. So the opposite of what they have been promoting. So they've been lying. And the racist Quentin Letts is, of course, among the deniers and among the people who are slamming Harry and Meghan for this interview. And this has got Fleet Street in a spin. They don't know what hit them because they are all over the place. They are contradicting themselves, and they're doing so with no care at all that they are getting it wrong. They should be saying, Fleet Street, that after this, Brenda should immediately stop the racism and then do the necessary detail to stop the impact of racism dating back decades. If they did that, then they would be doing something good for society, but they're not doing that. And on page 31, the Times says that Macron in France has lost a lot of support from the left, which means that the fascist Marine Le Pen is nearer the post of presidency. That is what is going on in France. So what is the Financial Times making of it? And the Financial Times is reporting about the company Green Seal, which is now bankrupt, applied for bankruptcy. And it says as a result of that application for bankruptcy by Green Seal, thousands of British steel jobs are at risk. On the headline, of course, they're not saying it's one of the consequences of Brexit. But it is connected with the consequences of Brexit. Now, in the briefing column on the Financial Times, item 3 is about Royal Rift aired in explosive interview. The Financial Times is not like a tabloid, but it's part of Fleet Street, but it is also part of the racist status quo, but it has to kind of provide evidence that it is not overlooking what is going on in that particular sector outside of direct finance, that is. And it's saying that the royal family is reeling from allegation of racism by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. In an explosive Oprah Winfrey interview that aired around the world. So what is the detail of that particular piece? Let's see. Of course, it is a business proposition that Oprah has sold millions worth of interview to nearly 100 outlets known and sub outlets that altogether number thousands. Thousands of stations and channels have now aired this interview. And the headline here is that the royal fairy tale turns sour and splits opinion. Embrace of race was too much for some in the palace. Sussexers say in television interviews, Sussexes is the collective name of these two, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. What a second name, this one, William Wallace. It directly brings back references to Wallis Simpson. Now, at the time of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding in 2018, many commentators seized on signs Britain's royal family was embracing the 21st century. The young prince was marrying a mixed-race divorcee from America who showed independent spirit, like Harry's late mother Diana, the Princess of Wales, and who was being welcomed to great fanfare into the royal family, royal household. As one black British commentator, who asked not to be named, said in hindsight of the hopes of wedding once inspired, it was as if the exclusivity of royalty and blue blood could be erased with a photo op. Any vestiges of that fairy tale disappeared during Oprah Winfrey's 2-hour interview with the former royals when it was aired on CBS in America on Sunday night. The Financial Times goes on, the most explosive revelations in the interview carried out in California, where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have exiled themselves since they retreated from royal life last year, revolved around race and so on. So what the Financial Times is saying is not invention, it is true. The racism rules the royal family. And racism is the one that actually drove Meghan out of the royal family and penalized Harry in the process, because Harry married this black woman. Financial Times saying that mixed race, there is no such race as mixed race. It's either black or it's white. And mixed race is a form of black, if you like. And what we have seen here is that Fleet Street hasn't learned the lesson. As Andrew Morton has said, Fleet Street hasn't learned the lesson that it should have learned after their whole series of mishaps that came out and happened, with the culmination of the murder of Diana in 1997. We call it a murder because it was a murder. There is no way. There's so many questions could still hang over how Diana had that, with quote, accident. And all the contradictory statements that have been made by various people shielding the monarchy from any blame. while the other side, Muhammad al-Fayed, remains defiant that his son was murdered, as was Diana, by racists, and he named Duke of Edinburgh, Brenda's husband, as being the main culprit who engineered the plot. Now, what is happening in the kind of immediate manufacturing of an image of Brenda as a person who has been made sad by all this? This is part of the plot. They have been doing the cooking of the plot as to how to protect themselves from the destructive expose that has taken place now of the racist Buckingham Palace. And they shall not overcome, because racism and racist royal family is the reason why there is racism, so much racism in Britain. And what this interview also reveals, and its coverage and the cover up, is that in the debate, in the kind of narrative, in the debate and the commentary, the political class, so-called, that is supposed to include the Labour Party in the opposition, they're nowhere to be seen or heard. The Labour Party doesn't actually exist. The Labour Party doesn't exist politically. So we come to the Labour Party kind of being irrelevant to every major issue in terms of the kind of intervention. And the evidence shows, and on the basis of the evidence, I have been saying that Jeremy Corbyn was intellectually completely unfit. And that is the case. I mean, he has, none of the fans of Corbyn, if you like, has come on the record to say anything. Nobody has come on the record to say anything about the unfitness of the monarchy. And it is not just over this, it goes back decades. If they have said anything about the monarchy being unfit or anti-democratic, that has not resonated with the overall commentary and narrative that they have tried to present. So we shall put more updates and updaters on that in due course. But we now go back to talking about the council's duties. The council, Tower Hamlets Council, that owed the duty of care and safeguarding to protect the children, Shamima Begum and her friends. Tower Hamlets Council's failure and negligence and betrayal of the children is consistent with the pattern of negligence about other duties. What I've just said is that Tower Hamlets Council's failure to safeguard Shamima Begum and the other children at the time and during the years that they needed the help and support is not confined to just safeguarding children duties. Town Hamlets Council is a failing, negligent, undemocratic, unaccountable, corrupt and criminally operated framework funded by public money in the name of serving the public, but controlled and abused by a bunch of criminals who operate via the level of being elected either as councillors or as elected mayor. Think about that for a minute. And this kind of negligence, lack of care, lack of accountability, lack of compassion, and lack of actual loyalty and concern for the protection of children who have been betrayed and let down. This extends to other duties that the Town Hamlets Council fails and neglects and abuses and denies, while being very firmly committed to claiming funding in the name of doing these things that it has absolutely denied and neglected and failed to carry out. So, the duty or the duties owed by the councils, the duties and compliance with the duties is zero. This is what I've written. The duties, the compliance with the duties has been zero. Let's give an example of, let's say, a licensed law trader. Remember what we mean by licensed law trader. We call any barrister or solicitor or legal executive. These are the three categories which have got so-called professional certifying bodies. The legal executive is the lowest one, and its so-called certifying body is called the Institute of Legal Executives. All three are based in England, so therefore they're called England and Wales. For those who don't know the constitutional arrangements or settlement, in Scotland there is a separate set of kind of bodies, and Wales is subsumed, that is to say, swallowed up by the English. So, for example, the Law Society of England and Wales is the name. And all the other associations are like that. If not in the actual name, but in the description. And what happens with the kind of institutional kind of discrimination that is operated in favor of England and treating Wales as the tail, that the racist decisions and the racist narrative and the racist denials are kind of legitimized by denials, if you like, lack of accountability. For example, there is a thing called the local government ombudsman that is supposed to be in place for looking at complaints against local councils in England and Wales. Now, as I said before, not today, but as I said before, my campaigning is done in a unique way, not because of my interest in making something unique. That is not the reason. The reason is that nobody else is doing the campaigning on the level that I have been doing and on the quality of my arguments and evidence that I do, that others don't do. For instance, there is a thing called Judicial Conduct Committee or something like that. This exists supposedly for looking into complaints made against members of the judiciary. Any member of the judiciary of any court in England and Wales is apparently entitled to make a complaint against a member of the judiciary who is misconducting themselves. That is the written claim that is why, or that is what the judicial complaints body actually exists for. But that's a lie, because there is no record. There is absolutely no record that judges have been disciplined at all, anywhere. Think about that. And that is in contrast to the suggestion by Private Lie, edited by Ian Pissoff, that the Crown Court Judge Mark Anthony Horton, who has been found guilty of some kind of misconduct, that this case represents the norm. It doesn't. And secondly, even if the finding of misconduct finding by whoever found the misconduct by Mark Anthony Horton would follow the finding by jailing the misconducting judge or fining him or something else. But it doesn't happen. And although this piece was published in the current issue of the Fortnightly Private Lie, it hasn't drawn any real interest in the Fleet Street, and so therefore they don't care. Fleet Street doesn't care, and even Private Lie doesn't care, because as I said yesterday, Private Lie has not given the real details about the mechanism that the kind of misconducting Mark Anthony Horton has been found guilty of, or has been told he's been guilty of. And this is a regular kind of example of so-called court-related cases being reported by Private Lie, by the very small number, if you like, of judges that have been actually named in the misconduct, etc. So if there is no public actual examination of the evidence that is undisputable and has been found against the likes of Mark Anthony Horton, then what's the point of saying that he has been found guilty? He has not been found guilty, because guilty is a criminal concept. Guilty is not a tort or civil concept. So whatever Horton was found guilty of would be peanuts compared to the resources that have been given to him and preserving him as the kind of careerist. And Horton has not been shown as a liar or anything in the report contained in Private Eye. And he must have lied, he must have done so many wrong and bad things. But the Private Lie doesn't mention any of those. Now that is seriously wrong, that kind of so-called journalism. Because every day, every sitting day, let's say, or every actual court day, despite the lockdown, there is contact, over even remotely. every decision made by the judges and the administration staff is a decision made by reflex activity, not active payment of attention to the many victims of the litigation process and the many victims who have come across as litigants seeking some kind of outcome. The contempt shown to the litigants and the way that the litigation is used as a kind of excuse or process and to skin and to exploit the litigants. None of the reports about the judges and the judiciary ever go anywhere near telling this truth. And that is the kind of theme, that is the narrative, that is the agenda, that is the scene. And we have literally hundreds of examples of how the courts are wrong and how the courts are negligent, how the courts are racist, and how the courts are failing to hold to account the likes of the government, likes of the ministries, and the likes of the office holders. Because what this ruling against Shamima Begum shows is the domination by the assumption or of the assumption that given the free kind of range to behave, the courts are doing just fine, doing the right things by the likes of Shamima Begum, who are treated fairly. That is the suggestion. Now, the whole argument, as was reported on yesterday's Times, in the law report, that version contains a summary of the reasons given apparently given by the Times, of the High Court, Supreme Court, whatever the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruling has been described as being rational, reasonable, and balanced. But three of the reasons listed by the Supreme Court are not reasons at all. And I think that we shall be continuing with this in due course. We are ending this particular one at at 4 minutes to 10. So we shall be returning with details of the negligence by the Town Council to these girls.